Amen.
Morning. I'm Jeff. I'm the minister here, and we're in the middle of a series of sermons talking about the church and why the church is valuable. Josh, last week started that series off and raised a couple of questions, and I kind of wanted to continue that today and talk about why it's important to go to church and why it's important to be. And when I say go to church, I don't just mean like this meeting we have on Sunday morning. I mean get involved, get to know some people, get connected, get a little deeper than just on the outside edges there, and why that's important and why that's valuable. And today I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. And I dusted off for this, an old preacher joke that I hadn't told in a long time, and it went okay first service. I normally avoid these sorts of preacher jokes because if they don't go well, then I'm kind of wrecked for the next 5 minutes of the sermon, worried about it. But we're going to shoot for it anyway and tell it, and you tell me afterward if you think it's an okay. Here's a joke. There was a man goes to a realtor, and he's ticked off when he goes into the office. He's mad. And I'm sick of him selling the farm. Had it. And the realtor says, oh, okay, well, great. Well, tell me about it, and we'll make an advertisement. And the guy says, well, it's an old rundown house, and I'm always repairing it. It's always broken. And I got this red barn out back, and the whole back end of the barns, the erosions knocked the hill out there, and it just kind of is hanging out over a bunch of hills. And there's a fishing pond down below, and there's fish in it, but the mosquitoes are so bad you can't fish it. And you can look down there and see Salt Creek with its floods every spring. I'm just sick of it, And the realtor says, well, we can't say that. How about if we say a rustic turn-of-the-century farmhouse, Lots of character. And maybe we could say like a stately red barn, overlooking gentle rolling hills. And a fully stocked fishing pond teeming with wildlife, yeah? And excellent sunset views of the river. Oh, stop, he says, the farmer. Stop. And the realtor thinking, maybe I pushed too far, what's wrong? I don't want to sell it. Oh, you mad because I was kind of exaggerating? No, he says, I've been looking for a place like that my whole life. Yeah, thanks. Anyway, the point of the joke is that sometimes we can get so focused on the negative, whatever the negative is, that we no longer see any of the positives, right? We get so focused on the bad that you can't see any of the good. And I think that's certainly possible when it comes to church. I think it's certainly possible to do that. In fact, I think at some level that's the devil's strategy, is to get you to focus on what's not right. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Screwtape Letters, talks about how the demons try to distract you with the material stuff. Get you looking at how the building may not be in good shape, or, the bathroom had a little bit of an odor to it or something like that, or parking lot was crowded. And then when you get in, you see some people that you don't really know, and they look like they're nothing special, or maybe you do know one of them kind of had a bad impression about somebody you saw in a different context, and you focus on the guy in front of you or behind you who's singing out of tune, and the guy who hands you a little pamphlet or whatever, and you're singing words you don't know, and the whole thing is they try to focus on the material. Now, when the devil looks at the church, of course, he sees an army, and it's frightening to him because this was Christ's plan all along to change everything. But that's kind of hidden from us. It's kind of hazy to us, and we're not able to see exactly all that. We just focus on one another. And on how, if we're being honest, one another's let us down. And I think, like that silly joke, that sometimes we can get so focused on the parts that are wrong that we don't at all see what the right parts are, or why God would even want to do this to begin with. So I wanted to talk about that. One of the things I talk about in a wedding, is this verse here. When we do weddings, I often bring this verse up here. It's Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. It says, the Lord God said, it's not good for a man to be alone. And that seems pretty easy. And easy to understand, right? I mean, there's something in us that doesn't do well with loneliness. And again, you don't have to be a Christian to understand that. I mean, You see that, right? I mean, that's what all the love songs are about. That's what a lot of the movies are about. That's what a lot of literature is about, that we're not totally ourselves till we find somebody, and how being by yourself. I mean, they break criminals, right, by putting them in solitary. There's something about loneliness that is in us, it is a wrinkle in us that causes trouble. And everybody sort of knows that. But what I point out, like in the weddings, when I'm teaching on this idea or this verse, is that this verse is in Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 3, that's when sin comes into the world. So before sin ever came into the world, before there was anything wrong with anything, it's not good to be alone. There's some sort of a wrinkle in us that I think will be in us even in heaven. You're not yourself really when you're by yourself. You really only discover what you are and how your boundaries and everything else. You need to bounce off of one another. The Bible talks about that in other places. In Ecclesiastes, there's a long passage. It says, 2 are better than 1. They have a good return on their labor. If either of them falls down, the other one can help them up. But pity anyone who falls down with no one to help him up. If 2 lie down together, they can keep warm, but you can't keep warm by yourself. Though 1 can be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. And a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. There's something powerful about just being connected. And all the other stuff in that little, I mean, it's all kind of childish the way that they phrases it, about staying warm and getting work done and stuff like that. But it's the truth. There's something about us being connected to one another that makes life work. And again, I don't think it's just a Christian notion. I think it's just a truth. I think we can see it in 1,000 different things. And Jesus, Josh talked about this last week, when he sets up his kingdom, he says, I'm going to build a church, and all the powers of hell won't conquer it. And this notion that we, in this meeting, but all the different little meetings of churches that are happening all over the world right now, that Jesus established that there's something powerful about it, and that when we get together like this, at some level, we're meeting that need that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, that it's not good to be by yourself. It's not good to be lonely. Now, I know Kelly Clarkson, I think, told us that just because I'm alone, well, I'm not lonely because I'm alone. I forget how the lyric goes, something like that. And I think that's true. I think that's true. I mean, sometimes it's, you can have a moment where it's kind of good to take a walk by yourself, or sometimes it's good to, have a weekend or whatever where you can kind of focus on your thoughts there, or to journal by yourself. But I think by and large, there's something powerful about us kind of coming together and figuring out who we are together. A few years ago, it's funny what sticks in your head. I mean, you expect certain traumatic things to stick in your head, like where were you when 9/11 happened or whatever. You might remember that right off. But it's funny, it's littler things that stick in our heads. And one thing that kind of stuck in my head, and I was thinking about it getting ready for this sermon, it was a board meeting, and it was in January in 2020, and we're having a board meeting, and one of the guys speaks up and says, hey, you've been seeing the news about this virus out in California and Oregon. I mean, I think that may be coming this way. We may have to think about what we can do to put people's minds at ease about, this COVID thing if it were to come all the way to Indiana. And one other guy in the group says something like that. I could even envision that we wouldn't be able to have church. And we all kind of shot that down. I mean, it won't get that bad that we'd have to cancel church. But we did, right? And we had to cancel church and cancel church for several weeks. We weren't able to get together. It was a wild time, just in the community it was wild time. There were toilet paper wars. We're going to talk about to our grandchildren, and they won't understand it. What? Yeah, it was a thing. The guy in front of you would have 40 rolls of toilet paper, and you wouldn't have any, and you'd be bargaining in the parking lot. And we think about how schools were canceled, and people got real suspicious and mean towards each other. Remember? And there were riots that summer with the race riots, but also like some political stuff, and And Trump was in the middle of a lot of it. And whatever you think about Trump, the good or the bad there, he's probably not the guy to calm things down. That's probably not his gift. And it wasn't getting calmed down. And everybody was getting more and more and more ticked off and more and more angry and more divided. And that was bleeding into church. And when we decided to start meeting again, there were people who were mad that we did. You're going to kill some old people getting back together. And which is funny because when we were canceling, there were people who were mad about that. It's not even a real virus, they said. It's all fake. It's all fake news. We should be meeting anyway. And it was just a wild time. In the church here in this building, it's empty all the time. It was such a crazy deal to work here and to just putter around in this building and no one's ever here. And we were putting out videos all the time. Mostly so you'd not forget that we were here, partly, but also, providing content. And so we're still studying and we're putting sermons out and we're putting out Bible studies and different things on video and trying to get that in people's, on their screens there so maybe they can think a few things about God while they're on their own. And we're real busy with that. I mean, in some ways busier with that than we would have been anyway. It was taking, if I spend 15 hours on sermon, normally I'm spending probably another half again as much time because I got the video and you're thinking about all that different stuff and how to operate it. And we're putting out all the content. And it was just awful. We had a couple people who were long-time saints, pillars of our church who died during that stretch. A couple of them died in the nursing home and I think died because of loneliness, because no one could come see them. We had a couple of people who passed during that time that if it had happened any other time, we would have made a big deal about it because we all leaned on them, depended on them, and to lose them was such we couldn't even talk about it because we weren't getting together. There were a lot of people who quit going to church during all that time. They were having real trouble in their family, but nobody else knew it because we never saw each other. And I think it did fantastic damage to God's kingdom. And it's weird because we were still putting the truth out. We were putting out content. But Jesus never said that they will know you're my disciples because of your content. It was always because of our love that was going to make us different. It was our love and being a community that was going to set the powers of hell to run the other direction. And when we weren't getting together like that, it did damage. And again, it's not just Christian damage. Like the World Health Organization said that depression and anxiety both went up about 25% during this time. People were struggling. And, you think your problem is all these other jokers you got to bounce off of, but being alone wasn't helping. Alcohol consumption went way up. It was a good time if you're in the marijuana business. Dispensaries were doing big business. People were self-medicating just to get through it. We're not made to be alone, and it's not good when we are. On the other hand, Paul says in Ephesians chapter 3 that God's intent was that through the church you could see the manifold wisdom of God. Manifold's kind of a cool word, multicolored, multifaceted, that through the church you could see how God moves. And so I wanted to say a few words quickly about the church. When I first became a Christian, the church was the part that I was least excited about. It wasn't that I liked chances to show how smart I was. I liked that if I could be like a Bible contest or something like that. But I didn't. I'm awkward, I always have been. I'm just awkward. It's hard to talk to people, and I get nervous and shy and retiring and everything. Those are just hard. And when I first became a Christian, you go to church, but then there's also this youth group, and then a lot of the kids in the youth group get together, other times, and I it's a lot. But I jumped in because that's what you did. You're a Christian, so you jump in, and those guys. Douglas and Danny, and they changed how I thought. I think about some of those youth sponsors that came in there, and Lee, who was such a great teacher, made me think about hard things, and Terry, and how patient he was, me getting through it. I wouldn't be where I was if it hadn't been for them. And Wonder Valley Camp, I was so scared about going to Wonder Valley that first year. Like, what if I want to go home? It's like jail, and no, you can go home. And I was worried about getting there and being stuck, and then it was just the best thing that ever happened. I mean, to me, I really got fired up about the Lord, and I got to meet some other guys, some that I'm still friends with. When I was a senior, there was this little skinny freshman named John Wisely, and some of you guys have met him, and we're still friends, and still hang out, and still work at camp every year. And again, those guys pushed me forward. I wouldn't be the guy I was if it hadn't been for those guys coming alongside me and pushing. I wouldn't have went into ministry. And then when I got into ministry and went to my first church, there were some hard parts, like that joke at the very beginning. There were some things that I looked at and said, well, I hate this. But there were so many good things. I mean, I still go see some of those families, and we still hang out, and we communicate and check on one another. California was the same way. I mean, that might as well have been Mars. There are people all the time who say that, I can't wait to get out of this little town. I was never one of those guys. I loved my little town. I would have been happy to be there my whole life. But God pushed me to California. And we had a ministry there. And while we were there, again, there were moments that it was really hard, but I still vacationed with some of those families. I mean, our lives got entangled with one another. And I just wouldn't be the guy I am. And when I think about my Christian life, going all the way back to the very beginning, almost all of my times of great growth have been with others. There have been other Christians who surrounded me. They weren't moments about me all by myself that came to a breakthrough. It was me talking with others and wrestling through it with others until we finally figured it out together. It's through the church, in my life at least, that the manifold wisdom of God has been made known. Now, when you look at some of the people that I was bouncing off of, some of them were pretty impressive guys. I mean, through the years, I've known a few people who were well known. In my church, in one of my small groups, had a major league baseball player. In another group that I was with, a couple of different guys who were signed musicians, and I got to know them. And I've met people who you would have heard of that I could talk about. But it was never those things that made it worthwhile. It's hard to explain, but it was the broken part, right? We're all just trying to figure this out. And some of those guys who were famous were just barely holding their families together. And some of those guys that were doing very well and had made something of themselves with some money or whatever had kids who wouldn't want to talk to them anymore. Or had addiction and so it was in the wrestling that you saw God move. It wasn't me being impressed with them that changed things. It was us wrestling through this together that made it happen. And Paul talks about that too. He says, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards or influential or noble birth. He says, but God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. He chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of the world, the despised things, the things that are not, to nullify the things that are so that nobody boasts. I mean, God's not interested in your achievements. He's interested in your heart. And when you come into a church, and especially if you get a little deeper than just showing up here on Sunday morning and getting out fast, then people are going to start knowing your business. I can't hide that. That's just the truth. And I know for some people that's a frightening thing. It's more tempting to keep those walls up so nobody really gets into my business and nobody really knows who I am. And if you get involved in a church, some of that goes away because God was never interested in building a team of overachievers. It was all about the broken helping the other broken to figure this thing out together. There's no bragging because we're all tied here because of Jesus. It's what he did for us. He's our wisdom. He's our righteousness. He's our holiness. He's our redemption. It's not because of how smart we are. Sometimes I'll talk to somebody at the end of their life and they'll say, quite honestly, I'm worried that I've not been good enough to go to heaven. And we'll have to remind them about the old gospel, the old story, is that you're not good enough. You're not smart enough, and you're not rich enough, and you're not attractive enough. You're not powerful enough to not need Jesus. Jesus is good enough. And so we hold on to his coattails, and he takes us in. And that's what this verse says. And Paul says, if you're going to brag, all your bragging goes to him. And you think about a small group of people getting together, a group of men getting together. I remember a group we had in California. We met every week. And how you guys doing? Our big things, we talked about, the 4 big ones were anger, pride, greed, lust. Those were our big 4. And we would ask each other, how you been doing this week with anger, you know? Guys excuse that one. Just being a man, you know. Pride and greed, and are you giving like you should? Are you praying like you should? Lust, are you looking at things you shouldn't? And we would talk about that. And being a better dad, and it changed me. It made me better. Calvin Coolidge was a president. Not much is talked about with Calvin Coolidge. I only know one Calvin Coolidge story. Would you like to hear it? Well, good, because I'm going to tell you. It's Calvin Coolidge story. It's the only one I know. He was known as Silent Cal because he didn't talk a lot. You know, really a man of few words, which is kind of unusual for a president, and kind of a man of few words. And once he was a church-going man, though, even as a president. As a president, he went to church, and he came back from church, and one of his aides said, how'd it go? Fine, he said. And the aide thought he would press him a little bit, try to get him to talk some. He said, what did the preacher talk about? And Coolidge said, sin. And he said, well, what did he say about it? I think he was against it. And that was all he got out of him. So now you know a Calvin Coolidge story. So, you know, take that home, impress your friends. Anyway, the notion of it, why is God against sin? There's a lot of reasons. But in the context of my sermon here, why is God against sin? Well, one of the reasons is because it isolates you. This painting behind me of the Michelangelo, and he's painting Adam there and God. And God is all flexed, reaching hard as he can towards Adam. And Adam is leaning away from God, and he's not even sure he wants to put his hand out there. That's what Michelangelo is trying to explain. It's the natural state of man. He's all covered up in sin, and God's right there. I mean, he's an inch away, but he's just not sure. Because sin it makes you incline on yourself. It isolates you. Really, any sin, it brings you back to yourself. It keeps you from others. And that's what Adam struggled with, and that's what we struggle with. The church is the antidote for that, but we battle that thing. You know, the men I got together with, talking on the 4 things, anger, pride, greed, lust, those are 4 things that isolate you. And some of them are really easy to see. Like anger isolates you because no one likes getting barked at. So if you're yelling and being hateful and mean and angry, people naturally take a step away from you. And when you're angry all the time, sooner or later you're lonely because of that. You may be in charge, but you're lonely in charge. You can see how that works. Greed, you know, if I'm greedy, then I'm worried you're going to have more than me, or you're going to get in the way of me having what I want. If I'm proud, then all I can think about is my opinion. I can't think about yours. I can't think about what you want. Even lust, which you would think would draw you towards people, it doesn't really, because you're using them. It's not, you're not getting closer to them. You don't know anything about them. You're just, like pornography as an example. You know, we have, as a culture, separated sex from procreation a lot, and we have separated sex from marriage much more than we should. But with pornography, you separate sex from even having another person around. In fact, you think about a person looking at their phone, and they're trying very hard to make sure nobody sees what they're looking at, right? They're hiding it. They're clearing their search history afterward, erasing all the cookies so that no one will know what they did. There's a certain shamefulness to it. And a person's looking at these images and they're filling their head with thought, but it's not drawing them closer to anybody. In fact, it's making them hide. It's making them isolated. Sin always does that. It curves in on you. Why does God hate sin? Because it keeps you alone. And it's not good for a man to be alone. Dietrich Bonhoeffer says sin demands to have a man by himself. I mean, just that first line's an interesting thought. I mean, and you see it with like a lust sin that's gotten out of control. I mean, this guy can't talk to anybody about what's going on with his life because he knows it's gross. He knows he'd be judged. So he just kind of keeps it silent all the time and tries to hide it. You think about a person who struggles intensely. I mean, they're angry all the time and they're isolated all the time. And all they'd have to do is say, I'm sorry. But they just can't. I mean, they can't make their mouth say the words. And sin wants you all to itself. And the more you dive into these things, the more isolated you are. The more isolated a person is, Bonhoeffer says, the more attractive is the power of sin over him. And the more deeply he's involved in that sin, the more disastrous his situation. You just can't get away. It's like a golem with his ring, right? And he thinks he's got this precious thing that makes his life complete, and all it does is make him hide. It twists him in on himself. That's what Tolkien was trying to explain with that picture. C.S. Lewis says the main work of our lives is to come out of ourselves, out of this little dark prison that we're all born in. The danger is we might come to love that prison. The little dark prison, of course, is all of our self-doubt and all of our self-assurance and all of our self-confidence and all of our self-self. We're meant to be with folks. We're meant to throw ourselves into that. And the danger for any of us is that we learn to not do it. Now, again, I can't say enough that if you open up the door a little bit on this, that people will let you down. Any of you who are married know that's true. Any of you who've had children know that's true. Any of you with parents know that's true. As soon as you open your heart a little bit to anybody, they could let you down. They could. Anytime you start to share your heart and really share what you're thinking and what you're scared of and what you hope for, somebody could take that treasure and misuse it. I mean, there's no getting around that. But you're not meant to be alone. And there's something powerful about the community of the broken all coming together. When we do it, we start to see how God works, even through our pain, even through our distress. When I come to a group of people and I lay out my heart to them, I suddenly have this option and this ability to be set free of the fear that I had and set free of my own weakness. I can take some of the great pain and hurt in my life and hand it to God, and He gives me avenues to use what I've went through to help someone else. And then when I'm helping the other person in His power, I walk away and say, I got more out of that than they did. So that's my challenge to you here today at the end of our service. I want to challenge you to push yourself to get a little deeper connected. Now, the small groups are our big tool for that. And if you're not in a small group, talk to me or talk to Josh, talk to one of us after the service, and we'll try to get you into something. But even if it's just you meeting with another Christian friend, and do it regular, every week, and you ask them, how you doing in the Lord? How's it going? I mean, how you doing with your family? How you doing? And talk to one another. There's just such power in that as a Christian. If you're not involved in any sort of a ministry where you're giving back, I just want to challenge you to push yourself to take a step that direction. Whether it's the bed ministry at the end of June there, or beginning of June, you can come help out there, or some kids ministry, help them with VBS, or help them with the kids teaching, the things that Mark announced earlier. Those are both great ideas. Jump into the women's ministry there and maybe even help them set it up. Get here a little early so you can help set up a few things and be part of that, get to know a few people. I know there's a risk in it, but I really do think it's in that moment that you start figuring out what God's all about. And that's all I had to say about that. Let me pray with you. Dear Lord God, I thank you for this group. I pray, Father, for them. I pray for anybody out here, God, who feels distant from you and distant, God, from what you're doing. I pray, God, you give them the strength to take a risk, to call out. And I pray, Father, today, if they do that, if they step out in you, that you meet them there. In Christ's name, amen. Won't you stand up?